want to be better with money, but dread the math? I get it. That's why this show is not focused on math, the markets, meme stocks, or even economic predictions. It is focused on how money fits into your daily life, from having healthy money conversations to caring for an aging parent. I'm Karen Coyne, certified financial planner professional and your host of Money Without Math. Join us for conversations that are practical, sometimes philosophical, and always fresh. Learn more about me at raymondjames.com/clarity, and be sure to subscribe. Most high-performance insights are directed towards increasing results, outputs in business, in leadership, even in wellness, but rarely at home. Our guest today works with elite high-performance individuals, and she's observed that contrary to the storied lone wolf archetype, many of them are actually in happy, long-term relationships. She wrote about this recently in her Substack, Ultra Successful. Our guest today is Dr. Julie Gurner. She's an executive performance coach. She's worked with executives, athletes, and entrepreneurs. She has a doctor of clinical psychology, and she's been compared to Wendy Rhodes of billions, minus the ethical dilemmas. Welcome, Dr. Gurner.
Thank you so much. That's a great introduction. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you said yes. I've been following you, I think, since I landed on Twitter. I still call it Twitter.
Me too. I mean, it's you have to be, for the original folks who've been on there for a while, I think it's the only way to go. Yes,
I agree. And I wanted to share something I really enjoy about your content is that, though you write about this ultra successful space, it's not hustly. I find your insights to be very grounded, and your whole energy to be very grounded, and coming from a place of, take what you want, leave the rest. I'm sharing my observations here, benefit as you wish.
I think it's, that was really the inspiration for writing the Substack, is that, I've been operating behind the scenes for so long, working with people who do jobs that I think many people might, or are in positions in life that many people might envy. I have clients who are running businesses that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, publicly traded companies, billion-dollar companies, both here and abroad. And so really kind of getting a peek behind the curtain, not just of what they do in their work, which is, the majority of the Substack, but then starting to branch out into some other areas that I think people are genuinely curious about, around things like relationships, class barriers we talked about recently, and how people rise through those things. But, particularly around relationships, I think a lot of times the press is given to those who are most visible. And the most visible actors who are ultra successful are often the ones that get the sound bites. They're the most bombastic, often the worst actors out there. And so, the people that we see that are visible, that the common public will look at, are not usually the best examples of what that group as a whole, how they operate. And so I try to kind of give people the real deal as I see it, and my decade plus of work, but also back it up with statistics that also seem to confirm what I see on the ground. And I think that it's a 1-2 punch that I hope that people really take in, because I think their lives can be so much more extraordinary than sometimes they think. There's always this sense that there has to be a trade-off, like I'm going to work, I'm going to give up everything, or I'm going to have this really happy marriage with kids and family. And I think you can have both.
Oh, yes. I love to hear you say that, because that's so true. And that's what all that hustly stuff does lead you to believe. It takes you down that path. And to your point, stable, loving couple, that doesn't make headlines. That doesn't sell anything. So.
Right. Exactly. I mean, nobody wants to read about that, that, the hedge fund guy who takes his kids on a walk on the beach every morning for an hour is not half as exciting as the man who's cheating on his spouse and, a person at a Coldplay concert. So all of those things certainly get a lot more attention. And just for clarity, the man at the Coldplay concert is not a client.
Right. But that's a great segue. That's a great segue because, I reached out because I, in particular, saw your Substack on an article you wrote recently called How Not to Get Divorced. And it was about your insights, like you said, kind of behind the curtain, your observations of these high performance, high achieving couples, and actually some things that they're doing really well that, again, how would we otherwise know these things are happening because they're not making headlines?
Exactly. And I think that part of the reason of kind of surfacing this stuff is so we don't have, people, there are a lot of people who are really striving to achieve out there. And I'm not opposed to, and in fact, I know that kicking anything off is going to take a lot of your time. And I call it like kind of periods of intensity. But it doesn't mean that you have to shut out the world, and that there's a lot more attainable elements of the ultra successful than sometimes we think. So I'm excited to talk more and dive into the how to not get divorced conversation.
Yes. One place I thought we could start was around your bullet about know thyself, because I think that's a big piece. What do you think?
I think that most people who go into business or who are ambitious in their careers, and this was really written for ambitious people, they know deep down who they are. I mean, they know that they're competitive. They know that they are, hungry. They know that they're very driven. But you have to make sure that you are, you're externalizing that a little bit. You're talking about that when you're dating, that someone doesn't think, hey, because we're in love and we're dating and we're going out for dinners, that like, that's what real life is always going to look like, and being upfront with the fact of like, these are the things I want to do. This is kind of what my everyday life looks like. Like, are we on the same page with a lot of this stuff? And I find that my most successful individuals have relationships where everyone's kind of sacrificing for the common good. Everyone's on board with the building. And if that's a conflict up front, it's going to challenge both your career path because you're going to have this constant stressor at home. And it also is going to make you feel guilty for, kind of the things you want to pursue. So you kind of want to find someone who is simpatico, not just in your values and, all the things that we talk about, but also on the path that you're on financially, having money conversations, talking about like kind of how you see the future, not just with children or not, but with, financially. And sometimes that means that you are not on the same page as a lot of your friends. And people are comparative animals. They look at Instagram and Facebook and other types of things, and they see their friends, going on a nice European vacation, buying a house, doing all these things. And maybe right now, because you're building, you're living in an apartment and you're driving a car that's a little older than some of your peers, and your stuff isn't quite as nice quite yet, but you have this kind of common goal of where you're going. And that can make all the difference rather than being dissatisfied and comparative and angry or resentful. And so knowing yourself and being able to communicate that upfront and throughout the process is incredibly important.
Yes, and you shared an example about, I think, right, about a client who was in that situation where they were making great sacrifices early on.
Yeah, I mean, the client was someone who, their peers, were purchasing a home and, going on trips and things. And, he and his wife were living in a small apartment and they had a couple of kids and everything's very crowded. And it feels like, oh, when are we going to kind of move forward in life? And, that same man, 10 years later has a company that's, worth well over $100 million, and he's doing just fine. And they're going on, safaris and trips that are quite extensive, and his life is very nice. But it's, I think one of the things that you forget is that there's a lot that goes into creating something like that. And all we see are the end results. We don't see all of like, no one posts on Instagram like, hey, had the same meal 3 days in a row.
Right.
That's not great content.
Right.
But we always see the other side of it, and that's what we celebrate. So I do think it's really important that people, really get on the same page early on, so that stuff isn't kind of the things that's going to drag you down. Like, let the real things, like the market or the problem with your business, drag you down. Like, don't let your relationship or a possible divorce, take a significant amount of your net worth, whether you're a woman or a man. There's the wealth that you create is gone very quickly. A lot of it is gone very quickly in the incidence of a divorce if you're not protecting yourself.
Right. Yes. And I always think about how, there's a whole arsenal of professionals to help you clean up when things go wrong, when things go
Yes.
sideways. There's divorce lawyers, there's, financial professionals, there's therapists, et cetera. But we don't dedicate nearly enough time, money, energy, resources on the front end to making sure that we don't get divorced in the first place. Professionally and personally, the business relationships as well.
No, I agree. I think that there has to be a lot of planning up front. And if you're going to really dive into marriage, think about, it's so unromantic to say, but think about marriage as both a personal and financial decision and a real investment. It is the most important decision you're going to make, financially, personally, within your happiness, for the rest of your life. So make sure that you're thoughtful about it, and, make sure that you do everything that you can to communicate exactly kind of what would make you happy, who you are, and really listen and use some of the good business skills you have to listen to the things that they want and make sure that they're a good fit for you. Marriage isn't all about you. So if you have somebody who is, wants very different things, it's a kindness to allow them to have those things with someone else if you're not the right fit. Because if they want that life, that's great, but it has to be the right life for you too.
Right. So you've got to really be honest, brutally
Yeah.
honest.
Brutally. Yeah.
And you just said a few things that I wanted to circle back to. One was about over communication, because you also talked about that in your article. And then the other piece was about, the other part of knowing thyself is that knowing that the things that you're great at in business can make you a really tricky, difficult partner at times.
Yeah, I mean, I will say very clearly that, like, the things you make you great in business make you a bear to live with, like really hard. And you have to make sure that you're drawing that line for yourself. Like, in your work, you could be high control, high competitive, very much about efficiency. And then you get home and there's, a mess because of the kids or the dog or whatever. Not everything's going to be like that. And sometimes people bleed their work selves into their home selves, and they end up like talking to their spouse like they're an employee and not like they're the person they love. And so you do want to make sure that you are always aware of who you're bringing home. I think the other part of that, though, is that, with once you're in the relationship, over communicating means a few things. It means when you start to feel that tension, that you're like talking about that tension. You're resolving the problems early, much like you would in your work, right? You're not going to let somebody just problems happen and just let them go for 6 months, 9 months. If you want to have a good business, you cut those things early and you talk about them and you resolve them. And also that you're negotiating and collaborating and talking about your work. There's a myth that, particularly around men, that when you're doing a job that like you don't talk about work at home. And honestly, unless, you keep things confidential that are, if you're a physician or whatever, that you would keep confidential. But if you're stressed, if you're struggling, if you're, going through some things, you have this hard decision to make, it makes you closer to other people to communicate that and to be like, so everyone's kind of with you on the journey. You're not alone. And it starts to erode intimacy when people don't know where you're at. So there's a lot of communication. And I had a client, for example, I talked about in the piece, that did a lot of M&A deals. It means he'd fly everywhere, and he has a very young family. And so he would, at the beginning of the month, say, this is what my schedule looks like, what's going on with you, and what's going on with the kids, and making sure that, he was able to participate in certain things that he could, and they would collaborate schedules up front. So it's a team, and you have to approach it that way. Once you're in it, you're a team. And those are the relationships that I see doing very well, lasting, and having high happiness.
So much that you just said there to unpack, but a couple things that, that I was thinking about. It's kind of a sidebar, but near where I live, there are these zipper merges, very short, there's 2 left turn lanes, and in short order, they turn into 1 lane. And there are people, I've decided there are 3 types of people in the world. The people who must win at all costs. They have to be first in that line. The people who are oblivious, they just have no idea that there's a zipper merge that's even happening. And and then the third is the category that realizes, the purpose of the zipper merge is to improve efficiency. It's not about winners and losers, and it's about improving efficiency. But, similarly, what I was hearing when you were describing that is that those couples who are successful are coming at problem solving from an approach of, what's best for us in the name of the big picture, not in terms of I'm going to win, you're going to lose, I'm right, you're wrong, there's a winner, there's a loser.
Right. They are highly competitive, but I think the great thing about them is that they see their spouse as being on their team. And so they're competitive for the team. They're not just competitive for themselves. And I think that in business, sometimes we think, oh, that man or that woman is so, they're all about winning. But what they don't realize is a lot of times being all about winning isn't just about that actual person. When you take it behind the scenes, they're about winning as a family. They're about winning as a couple. They're about that person is on their team. And so it kind of gets absorbed into that in the best of all worlds. And I think often when I'm meeting with clients about the things that break those relationships and making sure that, you always kind of touch on those things to say hey, how are things going? How's the work demands? How are those sitting at home, right? Because at times, because of who they are, sometimes they'll even forget that impacts other people, because things always just seem magically taken care of on the other side. And, making an effort around date nights or, emotional intimacy, or making sure that you make time and space for other people. Mm-hmm. So, your life gets very busy, and I think everyone's life right now is very busy. So if you don't intentionally make time for the things that matter for you, it's easy for them to just fall away.
Yes. And going back to what you were saying about how, those unspoken things and how that can build up. I mean, we have this tendency, right, in the absence of information, we just we go from 0 to 10 and just make this leap,
Yeah.
We make these leaps and jump to these conclusions like Olympic jumpers that are don't even know where they are founded. They're not founded in any reality oftentimes, but that's where, one partner can take that leap in the absence of information. So making time to connect and even just to share maybe what seems like trivial, basic information to you could actually be a big part of that lift.
No, I agree. I couldn't agree more. I think that being a good communicator is probably one of the best things that you can do. And I think that bleeds into other areas of communication that are hard, like how do you fight? How do you disagree, right? And so, if you go into war mode when you fight, that's probably not great at home, in making sure that you're always respectful. And, I say it may sound very old fashioned, but kind of not cursing at your partner, being someone who kind of can disagree about the issue, but not make attacks personal. Personal attacks are remembered even when they're forgiven, because there's a part of us that believes deep down that people believe them, the things that they say. And so, I want people to be mindful of how they approach that to kind of retain that bond and that intimacy and that trust. Because even when you forgive people, there are things that are kind of residues that sit with folks. And I'm invested in them having a great future and would prefer them not to have that stain.
Well, a lot of us didn't grow up learning how to constructively argue.
True. That's true. Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is something I feel like a lot of us learn through trial and a lot of error, and decades later, we finesse it a little bit. But what advice do you have for those who are conscious of the fact that, yes, I don't do well in these heated moments, and I need to do a much better job of communicating, especially in those heated moments?
Really super easy model to think about in your head is that it is not me versus you. It is us versus a problem. It is. And you want to always think about it. It kind of pulls them to your side of the table, right? Even if you're not liking them much in that moment, to say, it's not me versus you. It is us versus whatever problem we're facing. Maybe it's around scheduling. Maybe it's about work conflicts, time demands, or whatever it is. And keeping that in mind, that this person is not your enemy, that it's the problem that you're both trying to solve in very different ways that maybe you disagree with. Just keep that in mind. Not me versus you, us versus the problem.
Us versus the problem. Got it. Julie, what else in that article do you think, you want to highlight in this conversation today?
I think the one thing I want to highlight is it's going to sound odd, but follow it through. I'll try to make it brief. Is the statistics that back the differences in relationship longevity. So if you make under $50,000 a year, the chances of divorce are 45 to 55%, which is pretty significant. If you make over $500,000 a year, your rate of divorce is 20 to 25%, right?
Half.
So it's like literally half. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's literally half. But the people who get to $500,000 a year, the thing people don't recognize is that they were once under 50K. It's not like they were never there.
Right.
They don't automatically jump to that. So what are they doing differently, and what are the things they're able to withstand? And the things that break up those 50K marriages are things to really think about, like that's where high conflict, right? So knowing how to fight, the lack of communication, financial challenges, right? So not being on the same page there. So you want to make sure that you're kind of protecting that downside all the time, because the other statistic that to me is shocking is that divorced people have 77% less wealth than their non-divorced peers. And so, never setting yourself up for, trying to reduce that risk as much as possible. And, I don't say it in the piece, but certainly it may be unpopular to say, but if you are somebody who has significant wealth, I hope that you're going to sign a prenup. Like, I hope that you have, people in your life signing a prenup. I hope that you bring it up early. I hope that you're protecting yourself. I hope you're talking to your financial professionals. Like, this is a big decision, and it's not a lack of trust. It's like a life insurance policy, right? Like, you don't want to die when you get life insurance, but if that were to happen, which you hope never happens, you have some protection there.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. And I do sense that it's becoming a little less stigmatized than it was in the past. Unfortunately, part of it is because it's also around protecting against debt. It used to be that there was this perception that you had a prenup because you were, Zsa Zsa Gabor, and you had, right, this flamboyant lifestyle, lots of money. But today it's also, you could be coming into a marriage and someone is bringing in heaps of student loan debt, for example.
Good point. Great point. Great point. And it could also be around, there's a number of things, even like credit debt and other types of things. So that's a phenomenal point I didn't even think to write about.
There you go. Fodder for your next article.
That's right. That's right. No, I'm a very, it's very pragmatic, and I hope that people, the great news is if you're an ambitious person, there's a lot of good business skills that you do bring to the table. And so I hope people really do lean into those too. You've done some sort of negotiation, you're a good listener when you want to be. So it's about wanting to be. If you're somebody who is a leader of any sort, whether it's an executive in a company, you have to understand how to resolve conflict in better ways. You bring that home. Make sure that you are able to negotiate different demands and lead and prioritize correctly. Like there's all sorts of things that you can bring to the table that I think can be really beneficial. So I'm always hoping that, not just the bad stuff you're aware of and protecting against, but the good stuff you're actually allowing to come into the house and be something that you can apply there too.
Mm-hmm. Right. It takes a conscious effort.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the time I dated a litigation attorney, and
wow,
it was always litigation time. It didn't matter if it was at home in the kitchen; it was a litigation. And
oh my goodness,
yeah, so I quickly realized this was not going to work. I did not want to live in a litigation courtroom. That's what it was going to look like. So
yeah, well, at least you got a view into it and decided that it wasn't for you, rather than trying to make something work on a particular timeline. I think also understanding like why people choose to get married, is really important. If you're going to make that decision, is it because you think, well, it's just the right time, or this is just the next step, instead of being really intentional about it and saying, you should be. I mean, this is the psychology in me coming out, so forgive me, but like you should be great on your own. You should be happy on your own, and this person should be an addition to an already great life. They should add to your life. And if you see that a life can be added to and that your life can be even better, it's a great opportunity. But if you do it out of need or desperation or pressure, or it's just time, people don't make great decisions that way. And so I'm always hoping that you're in a good position to make a good decision. and, set up your life in a way that you're happy about and makes it even better than it is today.
You're right. You're right. And there's so many pressures, and especially for the women, when you are in your 20s, you're hitting your late 20s, early 30s, maybe, and your biological clock is like, let's get the show on the road, woman.
Yeah.
It's tricky. It can be really tricky. So it's no surprise that women and people in general are entering into marriage later in life, if they are at all. But I wanted to go back because you made such a obvious, such a point that's so obvious. And yet I know a lot of us don't think of it this way, but going back to the stats about the 50,000 marriages, and the $500,000 marriages, I think a lot of people, we see those stats and we think, well, no, duh. when you have no money, your whole life is conflict. When you have 500,000, like you're on easy street. But those marriages started off as 50,000 marriages, like you said. And so they had to have a certain set of tools to work through them to progress to the next, stage, and ultimately to be those couples.
One of the number one causes of divorce, are financial. And so that's why getting on the same page around that, people don't like to talk about it, right? I mean, I think that talking about how much someone makes, talking about where you want to go in your career, like, that's not great dating conversation for a lot of people. And it's not that you have to ask this on the first date and be a total jerk, but, kind of understanding, is this person somebody that, like, if you picture your life a certain way and you're going to be doing certain things for your life, it impacts a lot of other things. Like, will you move for opportunities? In my own life, we've moved for opportunities out of state, across the state. We've been, various places, sold homes, bought homes, like, we've done all of that. And if you're not on the same page and someone's like, no, I want to live in this town and this is where I want to be forever, like, that's an important variable to consider. And it's not right or wrong, but you have to be on the same page about it. And there's a lot of financial elements to that financial growth path that if you don't kind of align on that, it's really easy to fall apart.
And this is where, you hear when you're married or when you're about to get married, people say communication is key, communication is key. Yes, we know, but how? How do we do it? How do we argue better, right? These are the things that are so helpful to know is how we can better communicate. And so I wanted to call out one of the other bullets in that article, which was be a sayer. And I had to laugh when I saw that because a couple girlfriends, we have this mantra, which is say the thing. It's always the one time you don't say it. It's on everyone's mind, but like, am I going to say it? No. And it's like Murphy's Law. I didn't say the thing. And now something stupid happened. And it's like, you know what? This could have all been averted had we said the darn thing.
Yes. Oh, that's such a great mantra. And I'm glad that you have a group of friends who holds you to that. That's a great group of friends. I think that, because that's the right kind of pressure, right? They're like, please say the thing.
Please say the thing.
Right? Like, and they're probably sending you texts and all of that to say the thing. And yeah, I think that most people generally are pretty conflict avoidant. And that's what prevents us from being candid. And there's a concept by Kim Scott. She wrote a lovely book called, Radical Candor. And one of the concepts is that there is such a thing as ruinous empathy, where, you try to be kind, and in doing so, you do yourself and others an unkindness. By not saying the thing, someone is under the impression that you are different than who you are, that you have different needs than maybe you have, then you want a different life than maybe you do. And that is an unkindness for you, but it's also a disservice to them to be under that kind of illusion or belief. And so, saying it may cause you 10 minutes of discomfort or 20. It may even end the relationship, but it spares you so much down the road. I have this kind of funny concept. I don't know if it's funny in context, but I always say it's like fight up front. And, when I was starting out in my career, I was in forensics. And one of the things that they teach you very early on is that, if you're ever kidnapped or someone attempts to kidnap a person off the street, the thing they can do that increases their chance of survival the most is to fight up front. You don't ever get into that van. If someone tries to pull you into a van, you're going to fight with all you've got and, take your stand early. Because once they pull you in that van, you don't know where you're going. but the ending will be worse. It's going to be worse. And so when you're in a relationship and you don't say these things up front, you're going to go on a ride.
Yes.
And where that ride is going to be winding, and some parts are going to seem okay, and maybe it's going to be all right, but wherever that thing is going to end up, it is going to be worse. And so just do the thing up front that's hard and have that conversation, because you don't want to go on that ride. And you don't want to do it in your business either, for what it's worth. You know, if you have something that's going wrong at work and you kind of ignore that person, you ignore the employee, ignore the bad results, you're about to go on a ride, and that ride isn't going to be great.
You're right.
So you just kind of want to make sure that whatever you do, you fight up front. And if you do it right, it doesn't have to be a fight, because those early indicators are places and spaces that you can kind of insert how you're really feeling. And it can make the conversation easier than if you wait till you're down the road. So you kind of want to have those awkward conversations rather than the all-out, battles that will happen later. And it's worth that awkward 5-10 minutes.
Yes. And what I've learned is the energy that you approach it, like coming at it from a place of, it's not about what you stated earlier. I think it's very related. It's coming from that place of, I want to solve this problem. It's not about picking on you, or that I don't like you, or that I'm this and you're that. It's we want to together solve this problem.
Yeah, you're right about the energy, though. And we know that about everything. Like, hey, can we have a conversation for a moment? Or can we talk a little bit about this? Or is so much different than, I can't believe you did X. Or, are you doing this again? Or, that really annoys me. Rather than saying, hey, did you just, whatever it was, and kind of how you approaching with curiosity, approaching with kind of kindness. People know that people can take a lot of hard feedback when they have good intention behind it, and that they do. Mm-hmm. I have said, for example, if I go, this is going to sound really silly, if you go to try on jeans, right, you don't want to take the friend with you who just tells you everything looks good. Because if you do that, you might as well use the store person for that, right? You don't want that. You want the friend who's going to give you the hard truth and say, Julie, those are not flattering.
No, exactly.
You should definitely look for something that is cut this way or that way. Let's look for something else. And they're giving you terrible feedback, really, about your appearance or how this looks or how this makes you look. But you're welcoming it because you know that, hey, Jenna's going to be honest with me, and she's going to tell me the truth. And I know if she likes it and she's candid, then it actually looks good. And so you build this, it's almost higher trust with that person than it is with the person who is just going to tell you, whatever. So it actually deepens trust. It deepens your relationship across the board if you're able to be candid in a way that people know you're on their side. They know you want the relationship to win. They know that you want them to do well. You have good intentions. It builds trust.
Yes.
But when you start hiding things, not only do you become resentful, but it erodes trust.
Oh, that's such a great point. Such a great point. Well, with that, any last closing thoughts, Julie, Dr. Gurner, as we wrap this up today?
I hope that people approach their relationships optimistically and positively, but also that they listen to what they hear. And when you start to have that nagging feeling or something doesn't sit quite right, I hope that people listen to that. There's a great quote that says, what you ignore as a whisper will become a scream. And I hope that people really dig into that whisper and address it early. And even if it means that ending something that is going to make you feel bad, that you do the right thing for you. And it just pays off over and over again at various areas of your life. So listen to your gut, follow that, and be true to that.
Fantastic. I feel like this episode is worth thousands of dollars worth of free therapy and counseling. So
thank you so much. I hope it was.
I think so. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. And I hope people will feel free to go to Substack and check out Ultra Successful and broaden their horizons.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We will be sharing those links in the show notes. and as well as your Twitter handle, because great follow.
Thank you.
And like I said, for insights that are grounded, not hustly, take what you want, leave the rest. But it's in some cases worth thousands of dollars. So this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Karen. Great speaking with you.
Thanks again for listening. Please follow us on Spotify if you're not already, so you don't miss any future episodes. We'd also love for you to rate the show while you're there. Connect with us on social. Search Karen Coyne CFP on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. If you have feedback or if we can be of service in any way, please let us know. And now for the standard disclosures. Opinions expressed are those of Karen Coyne and not those of Raymond James Financial Services or Raymond James. Securities offered through Raymond James Financial Services Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors Incorporated. Clarity Planning is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services. Karen Coyne Financial Advisors, located at 12920 Connemara Drive, Suite 202, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742. Phone 301-739-7002.